Hello, and welcome back to Afterbirth, the crowning and birthing into the promise. This is something that the Lord gave me the idea to do a matter of days ago. I didn't even have the notion to do it. I was sitting and I literally was at the point of thinking, what happens after birth? Now, everybody knows when a woman gives birth that after she gives birth, she goes through a process to heal, to be restored back to her physical body being back in its equilibrium, and the process of now taking care of what she's birthed. Now, I knew this. And I do talk about this at the end of the series that I did on Instagram, Pregnant with Purpose. But I have a new perspective of how to talk about this. So we're going to do a new, maybe anywhere from 6 to 7 parts videos talking about after birth. Because we're talking about after birthing your business. Right now, we're in a season where the territory is ripe. It's ripe for birthing, it's ripe for building, it's ripe for something to happen that's going to be a blessing in a scenario. And because it's ripe, you have to position yourself for that thing to manifest. You understand what I'm saying? Whatever it is that you have had an idea to do, whatever it is that you've had the thought process to do, whatever it is that you planned out to get done, now's the season to birth it. A lot of us have been in a season where we've been pressing, we've been toiling, we've been in the process of doing something, and it just hasn't seemed like it's gotten to the place of birth. So when I got the idea for after birth, that tells me something. That tells me it's about time for that thing to come out. You know, when a woman goes into labor, it's pretty much not anything that's going to stop her from giving birth to that thing that she needs to give birth to. If you're giving birth, the process is going to finish itself one way or another. Either it's going to take you physically out, or that baby's going to come out of you. But the process of birthing, the pain, the discomfort, the uncomfortability, the process of, because it was a process going through the 9 months, right? But that time frame in which, from the time in which you start going into labor to the time of the fullness of delivery, is another process. And it's a quick one. You ain't in this process for 9 months. You're not in this process for a long time. You just birth. But what does labor look like in delivery for a baby that you're birthing? Well, let's just talk about labor and delivery for a woman. Now, we've heard, I remember years ago, I used to watch this TV show. I didn't know I was pregnant. And a lot of us that are in business, let's just say this. We was that Mary in the Bible that was like, wait, Jesus has been impregnated into me? We were kind of in that phase of maybe we had something that was an idea. Maybe it was a thought process, but we didn't look at it as something that needed to be bared down, pushed out, and birthed. Maybe it was something, and some people, what happens is, especially when you are, there is a push, and you may not know it. Maybe you've been sitting on something. Maybe you got an idea for something 3, 5, 7 years ago, and you got the idea, but every time you thought about it, it's like, okay, I think about it. It would be good to, if I did something with that, then maybe I'll do this. And then you worked on that part, or then you worked on something else, or then you worked on something else, and you just incrementally were preparing little pieces to go to be parts of what it is that you were trying to do. You were going through the months of development. When you're giving birth to a child, you go through 9 months of the child forming and developing. You were going through the development stages of what it was. You didn't know what it was. You didn't have all the pieces. You didn't quite understand what it was you were building, but you were building something. And now it's time for that thing to be birthed out. And 9 times out of 10, you're going to push through an experience to birth that thing out. What does that look like? How are you preparing yourself? What is that container? How do you put those pieces together for it to be received, for you to be able to develop what it is that the Lord gave you to do? So for me, what I've learned is, for me, I've done pieces over time. It's kind of like, I was thinking about this, was this morning or last night? A puzzle. When you create a puzzle, my mother used to do puzzles all the time. And the one thing that she would always say is, you do the edges first so that you get the framework for that puzzle, for the pieces to go in the middle. A lot of us have had the framework, we just didn't know how to put the pieces together. We even got all the pieces, but we didn't know how to birth it, because God hadn't given us the full picture of what it was supposed to look like. You get what I'm saying? So because we didn't have the full picture, we had all the pieces, and we were desiring, well, I got all these pieces. This is a lot of stuff, Lord. What in the world are we going to do with this? Well, now you got to birth that thing out. Maybe you got the design for that, or you got the development for that. You got the framework for that. You wrote the business plan for that. You created the proposal for that. You created this for that. You created it all. But now you got to birth it. And everybody talks about, during the time of birthing, it's a pressing and a pressure. You push, which means, for the Christian side of the community, pray until something happens. But I'll say, for my business folks, you press in until something happens. So you keep working on that thing. You line the things up. You get things ordered, organized. You get the finances organized. You get the business organized. We talked about all this type of stuff in the first half of this content. Now you're pressing it out. What does that look like? It looks like you taking the time. Sometimes it's sitting for a day. Sometimes it's sitting for a week. Sometimes it's sitting in a enclosure of space, and you just start working. And you don't stop working until you see the end result of what you are building, meaning you're putting the pieces together, you're developing the things, you're putting your hands to what it is that you need to put your hands to, you're getting things in order, you're organizing, you're developing all of this kind of stuff, and you keep on moving forward to get that thing developed. Maybe you're a blogger. I was looking at something the other day where the person was talking about, if you're a blogger, you go through the process of the steps, whether it is to create your email chain, whether it is to create your development thing, whatever it is. But you go through the series of steps in which you need to do in order to make sure that you have all of the organizational back end parts and the receiving containers and the autoresponders and all of these things in order, and you test it and you make sure. That's a process of birthing something out, because you're getting it in order and organized to be ready to receive what it is that you're putting your hands to in that season. Okay? But what happens after you birth whatever it is that you're doing? Good thing you asked. What happens after you give birth? You have to recover. You ever see a person do a business event, a launch, or something? The process it took for them to develop, create, put the things in order, especially for my business folks that like to do business in a way where they like to create the product, let's say 6 weeks in advance, and they allow the audience to dictate how the product is going to be developed over that 6-week period, whether they do a program live, meaning no holds bar. If you get mess ups, you get mess ups, but they're able to have a live containment audience that is in the program with them for that period of time, for them to be able to test out the theory, what it was supposed to be, how it was supposed to operate, what it was going to end up being, how it was going to be, so on and so forth. And throughout that 6-week period, they're grinding, they're pouring, they're developing, they're giving everything. They got the team on, what have you, getting everything done. Everything's got to be in ordinance and lined up. They do all of that, and then they complete the program. Everything's completed, and now it's time to what? Recover. What happens first? 9 times out of 10, there's a celebration. Isn't there a celebration when a woman gives birth to a child? It's that moments after the child is born where, one, the two parents take the time to enjoy the presence of the new child in that moment, and they just take that time and deal with one another for that short period before they allow family members, because sometimes, you know how it was when you allow family members, I don't know if they allow it now after what's happened in our society in the past few years, that they allow family members to come visit the woman that after she's given birth. And during that time frame, one, it's a moment of intimacy between you and your partner and the child. So let's say you have a joint partnership with somebody that you're working with. You take that moment after you've built the thing that you were supposed to be building, and you and the person bask over what it is that you've built. It's like, oh, we did it. We developed this, and it's in the process. You just take that moment to sit with the idea, and you're like, wow, we just completed something. Wow, we just developed something. Wow, look at what we've done. Just like a parent, the two parents would be after they see their child. Look at what we've created. Then comes the celebration of that. How many times do you see when creatives have movies that they develop, whether it was an indie movie, a regular movie, whatever it was, the first thing they do is have a what? Wrap party. If you're a musician, they have a what? Launch party. Movie premiere party. If you're just doing business, you have a celebratory gathering, luncheon, dinner, whatever it is, to celebrate this thing being developed. Maybe you do a pre-sale, or you do a element where you're showing the people what it is that you've developed in this moment in order to prepare for the fullness of the launch of this thing. You got through your test runs, you got through, now you want to make this into something that's going to be engineered and continued to be developed. But right now you're just celebrating the fact that we did it. But after that, you got to recover. As a woman, you have to go through the process of recovering, whether you had a C-section or not. I remember years ago that I was talking to a woman who had given birth to a child, and she said there is actually tearing that can occur if, when you were giving birth, they didn't give you the right instruction. You can actually split yourself when pushing that baby out if you didn't push when they told you to. Meaning, in the birthing process, you didn't push when they said push, and you didn't wait when they said wait. I recently recorded a piece of content where I was talking about there's a lot of people in this season that are pushing to move forward and get things done. And there's a lot of voices that are talking about, you need to get this done. You need to create that thing. You need to develop that thing. You need to build that thing. You need to. And I was in a state of, wait, I'm still getting instruction. That's what it is when a woman is giving birth and she's pushing the baby. If she pushes before the doctor says push, she could rip, which makes her recovery process harder because they have to then stitch that area up. And then she's going to have to deal with a certain amount of pain afterwards that she may not have had to deal with had she waited on the times that she was instructed, push now, stop. But if she rushed it and she pushed past that, she was going to run into recovery issues. What kind of recovery issues? Well, you have the tearing, which means they have to then stitch up the tearing, and you can imagine, depending on what they have to do afterwards, because a lot of women, are put into having to wear certain types of padding afterwards. And this may seem a little bit too much TMI, but a woman, after she gives birth, it's hard for her to hold a lot in. They have to do, for some women, they have to put in a uterine mesh that holds all their internal organs in place so they don't come out. What? What do you mean they come out? There are women that it's a condition called where the uterus will drop. When the uterus drops, and I remember hearing a story one time. I was at a business conference, actually, believe it or not, and the woman was telling the story about how she'd already given birth to most of her children, but what ended up happening is her uterus dropped. And when her uterus dropped, it actually came out. And then she had to go to the hospital to have it put back. This is why they put uterine mesh up there after you give birth. For my people, For my manly gentlemen, love on your wife because she gotta go through a lot sometimes. It's, they gotta put that back. So with that needing to be put back, that's a whole recovery process if they didn't put the mesh in there correctly. Or follow this, if during that process also there's a whole lot of discharge that comes out. Remember when the doctors always say, we've seen it on television, we've seen it when it comes down to women that give birth, they have a 6-week bleeding process. So not only are they dealing with stuff coming out of them, which is a discharge from all the months that they did not have their monthlies, they are dealing with a level of the ickiness, how their system is processing food, and all that's coming out dealing with the padding. So you got to keep that area clean. Okay? What does this look like for a business though? This means that as the person that has birthed, you have to be well aware of the time frames in which you need to take a rest, that you need to nest and recover, meaning you can keep an eye on the baby and you are making sure that it's eaten and that it's being developed and all of these kinds of things, that you're making sure that you're feeding it and nurturing it during this process. But the mother goes through a lot. The person that has just birthed this thing goes through a lot of discomfort during this period. I was listening to a video from one of the young women that I follow the other day, and she was talking about the fact that she had just come into something new and she was crying. A lot of women go through emotional imbalance after giving birth to a child. They cry. They are emotionally sensitive. And they're very sensitive about who puts their hands on this thing. When you give birth to a business, okay, one, you're going to have discharge. Meaning there's going to be things that cannot remain either around you or around this thing you've given birth to. Meaning all the toxins must come out, meaning anything that is a risk, anything that is a con, anything that is a contaminant, anything that would be bad one for you or being around this thing. You know how mothers sometimes they have a baby and they don't want nobody touching the baby for that first few weeks because they're like, you got germs, wash your hands. Go bleach yourself. Don't touch this. You better put on some gloves. That's my new baby. You may become a little bit self-protective of this thing because you don't want it exposed too much. Because you develop the product and you put it out there, but you may have a point where you're like, I want to keep my hands on this. I want to make sure that my hands, and you might start to be kind of suffocating to it. But that element of, what's the word I'm looking for? Protectiveness. That protectiveness gives off a disdain, especially for some people that may come around you. They may be feeling like, why you feel like this around? It's you done developed the thing. Why is it that you don't want nobody to put their hands to it? Don't want nobody to touch it. Don't want nobody, having their hands on it because you just gave birth to this thing. You don't want everybody and everything on top of this thing right now. Because of the fact that it's new. You don't want extra germs. There are women that get concerned about things like pertussis, which is a whooping cough that babies can sometimes get, or certain germs and all of this kind of stuff. You don't want anything to contaminate that thing that you just birthed out. You don't want a whole bunch of people in your ear telling you how you need to change this thing, how you need to, well, now that you done did that, maybe you should, stay out my ear. Because that's the other thing that people do as soon as you had to have a baby. Everybody and their mama, your husband's mama, your mama, everybody every female, sisters, moms, all females want to come tell you what's the best way for you to take care of this child. And you already moody because you may be still dealing with pain, soreness. If you're lucky, all you got is a little bit of soreness and you didn't rip or tear. And you're just waiting for that soreness period to pass and the bleeding period to pass. Which, great, awesome. But if you ended up getting cut, meaning this process for you to develop this particular thing to come out of you, you got cut, you got torn, you had to go have uterine mesh put in, you had to have all of this kind of stuff. So you actually went through more trauma to push this thing out. Think about people that have businesses and they have a pressing issue that if this thing don't come out now, they don't know what they're going to do. Or maybe they got deadlines. Maybe they got people they got to pay. Maybe they got all these kinds of things. These are all pressing things that's why it needed to be C-sectioned. Or you pushed it out too fast and you ripped. Meaning you went ahead of the processing time. You went ahead. This is how many times that I tell you about processing. You got to walk through the process in order for you to heal correctly. So you end up having to deal with those physical issues in the body. Issues in that thing. Things didn't go off as clearly as they should. Some stuff broke down. You managed to make it look good on the outside, but you knew what was going on behind the scenes in the background while everybody was trying to rush to make sure that thing came out, and it still looked good because of the fact that some things went wrong last minute and da-da-da-da-da. That's what tearing looks like. That's what this kind of, because you rushed it too fast. You may have had time, but you didn't take all the time that you had, and you didn't prep fully enough, and things didn't go as planned, but y'all managed to get it together at the last minute. Last minute. I mean, things were going out as you were getting things together. So, yeah. But the recovery behind that, maybe it's extra money that needed to be spent. Maybe it was loans that had to be made. Maybe it was all these kinds of things. And now you got to fix that stuff because you didn't let the process take its course properly. Okay? So I'm going to come back for the next part and explain this next section. So we're going to come back for part 2. Bye-bye.